Previously, I wanted to do a video on Dr. Roy Walford. Dr. Roy Walford is the guy that coined the term CRON, which is an acronym for Calorie Restriction with Optimal Nutrition, which is one of the only real proven ways to extend lifespan. Not the only proven way, but one of the only proven ways to extend lifespan. Although I do think it has more to do with nutrient density, which I'll get into with moderate caloric restriction with nutrient density. I'll get into that when I talk about Bruce Ames. Okay, so he was born on June 29th, 1924. He died on April 27th of 2004, age 79. His career highlights: Walford is credited with significantly furthering aging. He was basically the head of he was the head of the gerontology department of California University. Okay, so Walford is credited with significantly furthering aging research by his discovery that laboratory mice, when fed a diet that restricted their caloric intake by 50%, yet maintaining nutritional requirements, also doubled their expected lifespan. He received his medical degree from the University of Chicago in 1948. He completed his internship at Gorgas Hospital, Panama, and served his residency at the VA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He then served 2 years in the U.S. Air Force during the Korean War. Walford joined the faculty at the University of California at Los Angeles. He became a professor of pathology at UCLA School of Medicine. In 1966, he became professor of pathology and laboratory medicine emeritus for UCLA. He was the director of the Blood Bank and Hematology Division of the Clinical Laboratories, 1959 to 1980, director of the School of Medical Technology, 1962 to 1972, chairman of the Vivarium Committee. I don't know exactly what that is. I think that's a laboratory. I think that's a private agency, 1965 to 1968. In addition to his service at UCLA, he was an expert advisor in immunology for the World Health Organization from 1969 to 1984, was a senatorial delegate to the White House Conference on Aging in 1981, and a member of the National Institute on Aging. His honors and awards include Levine Award of the American Society of Clinical Pathology, Research Award of the American Aging Association, Kleemeyer Award from the Gerontological Society of America, Henderson Award from the American Geriatric Society, 1998 Longevity Prize of the Foundation IPSEN, the Senator Alan Cranston Award, Infinity Award of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. Asteroid number 4629 was named after him by its discoverer E. Helene in 1986. Walford and his work were featured in print in dozens of articles in popular publications such as Omni, Discover, and Scientific American during his life. He also made dozens of featured appearances on various television shows. He's also famous for his roulette winnings. In 1947, while on vacation during his medical school, Walford and Albert Hibbs, a mathematics graduate student, used statistical analysis of biased roulette wheels to break the bank in the Reno. They tracked the results of the spins, determined which wheels were biased, and then bet heavily on the ones which were unbalanced. The casinos eventually realized that Walford and his friend knew what they were doing and threw them out. A Life magazine photographer captured the pair drinking milk and counting their chips in a photograph published in the December 8th, 1947 issue. Their methods were also mentioned in the roulette book, The Eudemonic Pie by Thomas Bass. Different sources have the pair winning anywhere from $6,500 to $42,000. The high end is more likely, as Walford was reputed to have paid for part of his medical school education and a house from his winnings. The pair also bought a yacht and sailed the Caribbean for over a year. Biosphere 2, this is where the magic happened. Walford was one of the 8 crew members who were sealed inside Biosphere 2 where they lived from September 26, 1991 to September 26, 1993. Walford served as the crew's physician during his stay in Biosphere 2. The crew found that they could not grow as much food as anticipated, so Walford convinced the crew to follow his calorie restriction diet. In November of the first year, the crew decided to open a cache of emergency food supplies grown outside of the bubble to supplement their meager diets. Life's end. At age 1979, Roy Walford died of respiratory failure as a complication of ALS, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. He was cremated and his ashes were scattered at sea. According to Walford's friend and colleague Kathleen Hall, his diagnosis of ALS came as a result of her urging him to see a physician when she noticed the strangeness of Roy's gait. She says that before his death, Roy continued writing, taking courses on film production. He had me look all over New York and Dallas for just the right production shots. Meanwhile, Hall members that Roy and I, together with his daughter Lisa and his friends, exhausted all literature looking for a cure, a solution. She found herself scouting the alleys of Chinatown in New York, searching out a particular mushroom, looking for the best grass, they mean marijuana, to help him through the pain. Even before developing ALS, see, this is a problem. Marijuana is not a safe thing. So even before ALS, developing ALS, Walford was no stranger to grass. In his book, Eternity Soup, Inside the Quest to End Aging, Greg Kreitzger says that Walford's consumption of marijuana was legendary. I'm wondering how much that played a role in whatever happened to Mr. Walford. Walford was survived by his 3 children, Peter, Morgan, and Lisa Walford, their mother, Martha Sylvia Schwalb, to whom Walford was married for 20 years before divorcing in the 1970s. His published works, leukocyte antigens and antibodies, the ones that I own are the 120-year diet and maximum lifespan, and I think I may have done reviews on them. If not, I will be doing reviews on them in the future. I need to get beyond the 120-year diet. Okay, so these are some external links. That's a documentary of his that I'll be going over in a little bit. Okay. So this is Dr. Walford's homepage, and I wanted to go over a couple of pages dedicated to, of course, to the extension of life through caloric restriction. So this is the Calorie Restriction Society. There will be a link to this in the description itself. There's calorie restriction recipes that you can look up. So these are some of the recipes that one might follow on a calorie restriction diet. Base ingredients for sauces. Okay, so this is done in a blog type manner. I haven't been to this website in years, honestly. But let's see what else his website has to offer. Resources. Let's see what resources they have. Eat Less, Live Longer. Time Magazine special reviews. The theories on mechanisms of caloric restriction. It doesn't exist anymore. Yikes. Now you would think that one of these might exist, huh? Well, that was unfortunate. Many of the many of the resources that were linked on Dr. Walford's site don't work. So this is a vegan CRON diet, or a vegan CRON diet website. Vegan CRON calorie restriction for optimal nutrition. So what would you eat on a vegan CRON diet? You would eat fruits, grapefruit, kiwi, oranges, grapes, apples, melons, berries, pears, stone fruit, vegetables. You would eat spinach, mushrooms, yams, broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, green beans, cabbage, salad, greens, kale, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, celery, bell peppers, and cucumbers. Drinks, you would drink tea, soy milk, almond milk, hemp milk, fresh fruit, vegetable juice, fresh smoothies, beans and grains, pintos, kidney beans, black-eyed peas, limas, cannellis, garbanzos, lentils, brown rice, quinoa, millet, tofu, seitan, seaweed, non-dairy yogurt, tempeh, olives, nuts, hake meat, I think that means fake meat or mock meat, miso, corn, textured vegetable protein, nuts and seeds, sunflower seeds, walnuts, almonds, Brazil nuts, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, sesame seeds, cashews, nut butters. Excluded foods would be wheat, processed sugar. I don't see why wheat is excluded, but it would be but processed sugar, white potatoes, dairy, and eggs. There would be no reason to exclude wheat on a regular vegan CRON diet. I guess they're just avoiding gluten as well. So let's see, archives. Wow, this site's pretty slim pickings too. This is another vegan CRON website called CR Vitality. Let's see if this one has more going on. Oculus Quest 2 makes exercising fun and gets you fit, forever young. Does looking young for your age mean you will live longer? Let's see. Disclosure, the article may contain affiliate links. If you're lucky and have the right genes, you may grow up looking younger than your actual age for most of your life, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Lure Sue, a woman who is about to celebrate her 45th birthday, looks as if she is in her early 20s. She protects her skin from the sun and eats a fairly strict vegetarian diet that consists mainly of fruits and vegetables. Her ultra leanness isn't down to going to the gym either. Her exercise usually consists of regular walks and bike riding. Her slim figure is mostly down to diet and her strict diet. Lure Sue, at 44 years old, in the picture below, she was born in August 1975. Okay, do they have more pictures? There we go. I think that Lure Sue is quite exceptionally young looking, and it seems the internet agrees with me, as there are literally thousands of articles published about her literally not aging. It's really not that common to genuinely look 20 years younger than your age at just 44 years old. I would love for... Okay, this is a video about her. There are many other examples of people who have been on the calorie-restricted diet for an extended period of time, and they look quite a bit younger than their chronological age. Okay, this is an interview with a gentleman, David Fisher, that's been on the CRON diet for quite a while. Let's see what that has to say. Oh, this is not the video. I thought this would be the video. So David Fisher, 61 years, is one of the few long-term adherents to calorie restriction. This is what he looks like. He looks quite good. He's been on the diet for 30 years. And I do think that the calorie restriction diet is worth doing. David Fisher, 61 years old, is one of the few long-term adherents to calorie restriction in the world. While most people only stick to a diet for just a few weeks or months at a time, he has managed to maintain a strict calorie restriction diet for 30 years. In 2004, he was featured in The Guardian, where he explained how he came across the diet, why he began restricting his calories, and he gave some information about his diet at the time. Then in 2009, Dave took part in a series of interviews in newspapers such as The Independent. It's linked here. Okay, this is the video. This is from 2012. So let's see what he has to say in the video.
But some just can't wait. Since childhood, David Fisher feared getting old. For 20 years, he's lived on a severely restricted diet.
I'm 55 and I feel great.
Keep in mind, he's 55 there. Take a look at this gentleman at 55 years of age.
Great.
For 20 years, he's lived on a severely restricted diet.
I'm 55 and I feel great.
His eat less, live longer theory comes from experiments on rats.
One of the great discoveries on the biology of aging was if you reduce the dietary intake really pretty stringently, you get these very, very long-lived and healthy rats. And this phenomenon is something that isn't really understood how it works, but it works in a range of species. It's not clear whether it extends lifespan in humans. It does so in rhesus monkeys.
There are lots of good things in apples and pears, but of course if you had an apple and a pear every day, then that adds a fair number of calories to the diet. And you can get most of the nutrients from both by just consuming the skin. Then I can just peel the skin and just eat that.
Notice he's talking about just consuming the skin, as I explained with the phytonutrients. Most of the phytonutrients are in the skins of these fruits, not in the flesh, not in the juice.
And then throw the rest away. You have to accept that that's an experiment because it's not something that's been tried and it takes a lifetime to actually try it out.
At 55 and eating a third less than the recommended daily intake, Dave hopes he's buying time for the big breakthrough.
If you can extend your life by just a few years, and during that time, science continues to work on the problem, they may come up with something which allows you to rejuvenate your body at an older age.
Okay. Let's see what else this website has to offer. Interview with Anne. Let's see who Anne is. Oh, I guess it doesn't go to Anne. Let's see if that was a mistake there. So, not a 9-to-5 girl, Anne Van Broek talks veganism, being a mother and fulfilling dreams. Anne Van Broek, 32 years of age, has been a vegan for at least 13 years, long before veganism became popular. During that time, she has been an outspoken activist of animal rights and welfare. Her platform, primarily on YouTube, has enabled her to reach millions of people over these years and has gained quite a following after hard work and dedication. Anne has also achieved a master's in sociology, which may have helped her understand, communicate, and engage better with her followers about her thoughts on a variety of topics. Okay, this seems to be... Anne has also recently seen huge success with her rapidly growing YouTube channel called Rapunzel ASMR, which is now closing in fast on 500,000 subscribers. No doubt she has been ahead of the curve. Tell us why you decided to go vegan. Okay, this is mostly about veganism, not CRON. But this is just her talking about 15 years old. A girl in my class told me that we don't need to eat meat to be healthy. I actually always believed we did, so that is all I needed to turn vegetarian. Oh, interesting. But that's not really about CRON. I wanted to take a quick look at this documentary. This is about Roy Walford. This is a documentary about him. It's only a 10-minute documentary, so let's take a look at it.
One of the things that is so fascinating about him is, on one hand, you have this incredible scientific brain, but on the other hand, you also have an actor, a writer, a musician, really. I mean, someone who's really in touch with all the ways you can create things. He was a creative.
Aging is a biological process that we can bring under control pretty well. We can certainly retard it right today, and we might eventually be able to stop it completely.
Now, when I start talking about Dr. Kenneth Cooper, because I'm going to be doing a video on Dr. Kenneth Cooper, I'm going to be talking about the importance of vigorous exercise and a nutrient-dense diet, as well as supplementation. Dr. Walford explains the importance of supplementation in his books, but he does not, I don't think that he understood the importance of supplementation enough. I think that he settled way too much on the calorie restriction aspect and not enough on the nutrient density aspect.
Completely.
Faustus, leave these frivolous demands which strike a terror to my fainting soul.
The Faustian thing was big.
I know that Faust was one of the first pieces of great literature that he ever read.
Apparently he was a child and he was sick in...
Faust is, of course, the story of the gentleman that sells his soul to the devil for eternal youth.
...bed and then heard on the radio someone reading the Marlowe version of Faust.
And he was completely bowled over by it. Because he kept thinking to himself, why is it? What would be worth someone giving up their soul for? What would be worth that?
It wasn't really the idea of making a deal with the devil. I don't think Roy ever thought in those terms. He simply thought in terms of the guy who had an overwhelming passion to do something, no matter what anybody else, no matter if anybody else lost interest.
So he committed himself to getting all knowledge.
That's very important, that he had the ability to dedicate himself to something. When other people were calling him crazy, Walter Longo, who was basically his protege, explained that people thought he was a mad scientist when Walter Longo was learning under him. And it's important that you have people like that can push science forward like Dr. Walford did. At the expense of their own popularity, even at the expense of their own credibility, because people thought the gentleman was a mad scientist. But the work that he did is still being used. It's what was seminal to Dr. Longo creating the longevity diet in many ways and creating his fasting mimicking diet. I actually think the CRON diet is somewhat superior to the fasting mimicking diet. I've tried both.
And I remember him telling me that when he read this as a youngster, it was his one reasoning for wanting to look at aging.
Now, this is one of the things. I think people that are driven to understand aging, it's something that just comes. I've been driven to understand aging and how to prevent aging and how to retain my youth since I've been about 10 years old. And I share that with Roy Walford. I think Roy Walford, obviously shared the same interest. It's a very interesting thing. There's no reason. I mean, when you look at aging, aging is somewhat of a disease state. Okay, and you can see that, and as a person that can see that, you have to think, well, if you can treat other diseases, why can't you treat frailty? Why can't you treat this disease that isn't being called a disease, that's causing these other disease states? Most disease states, as Morgan Levine has pointed out, are caused by the aging process. The degenerative process of aging has caused these disease states to arise, things like diabetes, the senescence of different systems, such as asthma, such as these things. These are brought about by immunosenescence and different forms of senescence in different tissues and different systems of the body. And now that we understand more, and it's getting easier to see this, that various so-called chronic diseases are the result of biological aging of various systems of the body.
What he was seeking and continues to seek in the sciences is an extension of life, of thought, of possibilities, of alternative forms.
I first encountered Roy in the medical library, actually, via his research writings. Most people who are practitioners of this longevity diet, or CR, read his popular works first.
As I say, I read his book, which is really very literate and quite deep, and has shows an understanding of all kinds of things. But I knew of Roy because I had read his book when I was in medical school, Maximum Lifespan. It was very inspiring. It was then that I decided that I wanted to go into gerontology and geriatrics. So I never would have gone to work for Roy if I hadn't read the book.
I had gotten really ill. I had food poisoning that I got down in Mexico, and I recovered quickly, but I decided to take care of myself, learn a lot about it.
This gentleman is the co-author of The Longevity Diet.
Nutrition and research gerontology and anything that would help me live better, longer. So I went to the medical library. Figured I'd go right to the source. And that's where I encountered his research writings that started, I guess, in the 60s, where he develops new theories of the relationship between changes in immunity and aging.
As far as people wanting to live longer, well, one of mankind's oldest dreams is to live longer, to have a greatly extended lifespan, to 200 or 300 or whatever. And we know now that there have been three traditional kind of goal-like dreams of mankind, have there not? One has been the transmutation of metals. That's the old alchemical dream. Another one is to go to the moon and planets and stars and stuff like that. Another thing is to have a greatly extended lifespan. We've seen in our own lifetime today that the first two of man's ageless dreams, transmutation of metals and going to the planets, have already been solved. So this is the third one.
He said as a youth or young man, he just wanted to live forever, that there were so many things to explore in this world. Plus, if you could extend your life, you could have multiple careers, you could have multiple marriages, you could have, you could accomplish all kinds of incredible things in this world.
He really didn't feel that life needed to be restricted to so many years, because yes, he wanted to keep on going and keep on doing, and he certainly believed the whole thing with diet restriction was to make your last years very vital. And as I look at older people, I think that's a bit tough because, you know, you really have to work at it because it's planned obsolescence in our bodies even. But Roy truly believed in going for that.
Yeah, just the line that flashed through my mind from Coleridge's Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, which goes, "Oh, happy living things, no tongue your beauty might declare."
Because nowadays, people who are 60, 70, 75 are not really old. You know, but if the age was 120, where you could have a lifespan of 120, then someone who is 90, 95 would be old. And the whole social structure of the world would change, too.
What's it going to be like to have, which is already happening, this huge population of old people?
The first time I met Roy, he walked into a room full of people in a saffron robe.
What you need to understand too, like that lady had previously stated, that all these old people, The whole goal, when I go into Maria Konovalenko, who was greatly inspirational to me, the goal is not to have a bunch of old people. The goal is to have a bunch of people that are chronologically older, but biologically younger. And that's not just something, that's also something that Dr. Morgan Levine talks about, and I'm going to get into Dr. Morgan Levine also. But let's keep this in an understandable manner. You're not trying to preserve a decrepit lifespan. You're trying to preserve youth and vigor for as long as possible.
And of course, he had nothing on from the waist up, just a lungi.
And he proceeded to tell me the story of how he went around India. This was the reason he was wearing the saffron robe, of course. So
more or less traveling as a semi-naked seeker around India, studying body temperature in relation to aging in Indian yogis, but also
this is actually quite interesting. When you restrict your calories, obviously it lowers the metabolism, and what he found is a lower metabolism is correlated to greater lifespan.
He said he funded his way around India by sticking thermometers up Swami's asses, which, of course, I guess I was 21 or 2 or something like that, and I thought that was entirely delightful.
There he was, Roy Walford, and he pretty much radiated energy.
Of course, I'd never met anybody like him.
Don't have ice cream on my mustache or something.
You have a little bit.
No.
It looks good. No, I'm joking.
So he'd always be out for adventure. Great humor, of course, incredibly intelligent, and every little story would just be tied into, like, you know, world history and literature, and just amazing.
Well, Roy was curious about all kinds of things. He would push the boundaries for the sake of, if you want to call it art, for the sake of putting something together differently that nobody had ever done before.
Well, Roy took me to Reno to see his aunt once, and he told me the whole story about how he and Al had busted the bank.
He and his friend Al Hibbs were able to turn $100 that they had borrowed from my Aunt Bee into more than $10,000 in a week.
And they figured out that they could statistically figure out the proclivities of the roulette wheel, because the wheel was a manufactured thing that had the small flaws in it.
The system was that a roulette wheel, like any machine, after it runs for a while, can develop certain imperfections. And that imperfection can mean that one number has a statistically small but significant higher probability of coming up than the other numbers. And you only need a small change like that for the odds to turn in your favor.
So I wanted to get into some of the interviews with Dr. Walford, so here's one right now.
Here to tell us that we may be able to double our lifespan in, what, maybe 15 years?
Well, 15 years, maybe less, maybe a bit more, yes.
We will talk about that a little bit later. You are, of course, an immunologist and a professor of pathology at UCLA, and Dr. Timothy Leary was on our program and mentioned to us about some of your findings. Before we get into that, though, let's go back a little bit in time. Today, the average lifespan of the average American is 74 years of age, which sounds a lot to those people who were living hundreds and hundreds of years ago. When did that occur, and at what point was the largest stride made in terms of increasing our lifespan?
Well, the largest stride was probably made from the 17th century up till now. In ancient Rome, average lifespan was about 22 years. Then with progress in public health and better hygiene and some progress in medicine, it gradually increased until about 1900, it was still only about 45 or 50 years, but since then it's gone up to about 74 years. That's average lifespan. Average lifespan means the time at which half of the population who were born will have been dead, 50% survival. That's average lifespan. It's now 74, 75 years in the U.S. In Sweden, it's up to 78 or 79. That's the longest lived.
Do we know why
country
it's
at the
higher in
moment.
Sweden than here?
Oh, I think just because of environmental factors, diet, general educational level, and people take personal hygiene, better care of themselves, medical care, things like that.
It's important to note the medical care because you have to remember Sweden, they did have socialized medicine, they still do. Socialized medicine is very important to achieving extended lifespan. The United States is one of the only countries where the lifespan keeps dropping. Only industrialized nation where the lifespan keeps dropping.
People seem to be obsessed with aging here in our country. All the ads that you see have all the young women in them and the young men having a great time with gusto and zest for life. The cosmetics industry has not seemingly at all been hurt by our recession. What is aging? How would you define it?
Well, aging, you can define it by a survival curve, is the way that the scientists would define it. That is, if you begin with 100 animals or people in a population, how long before half of them are dead and how long before the last one is dead? This finally would be maximum survival. Survival in the human population is about 110 years. This hasn't budged since ancient time, even though average survival has gone from 22 years way up to 74 years. 22 years ancient Rome, 74 years today. Still in ancient Rome, a few people would live to be 110, especially senators, things like that, Seneca and so forth. But nobody lived longer, and the same is true today. So this means that actually the rate of aging, which is better measured by this maximum survival, has not changed since ancient Rome.
But what specifically happens to the body? When you're older, things take longer to heal. If you get a cut as a child, it heals almost instantly. If you're an older person, it takes weeks, sometimes months, for bones, cuts, and everything to heal. Why is that? What happens in the body that we break down somehow?
Well, there's an increasing vulnerability with age. That's the other way to define aging. Increasing vulnerability to minor onslaughts from the environment or other things. What happens is that each organ system ages kind of independently, but they also age together.
You have to remember that this was known when Dr. Walford was talking about this, but it's been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt now with the epigenetic clocks and things of that nature, and that's why I recommend people read True Age by Dr. Morgan Levine. I still recommend people read that book.
One of the main pacemakers of aging is the immune system. It's the area that I work in, immunology. With the way to think about that is the immune system exists to repel invaders, bacteria, foreign proteins, ragweed pollen, hay fever, and stuff like that. So the immune system manufactures antibodies, tiny proteins that combine with any invader and eliminate it. The ability to do this declines with age.
Do we know why, though? I mean, what changes? All of a sudden, one day, you get a back pain and you're feeling that you're getting older, but why?
Well, that gets to another level. Let me tell you why we age first.
All right.
This declines with age to about 10% of its peak value. At the same time that this is going on, the immune system begins to react against the body. If you get a kidney graft from another person, your body recognizes it as being foreign and rejects it. But by the same token, your body can't reject your own kidney or your own heart or your own brain, or it's not supposed to. It's supposed to tell the difference between self and non-self. With age, this deteriorates, and part of aging, part of the wrinkles and the kidney disease and everything, is the body reacting against itself. Okay. Now, the next question is why all this happened. That goes to a deeper level in biology, and you don't really know the answer about that. There are a number of theories. One good theory is the DNA repair theory.
Which means that DNA breaks down and can no longer do what it was before, but there is an ability to repair this. This is one of the things you're working on.
There is an ability to repair DNA, yes. The DNA, you have a long strand of the double helix of the DNA, and in the course of normal metabolism, different things happen to it all the time. Scientists used to think that it was kind of a long, stable kind of a substance. As a matter of fact, the DNA in one cell is about 6 feet long if you stretch it all out. You used to think that it was stable like a blueprint or a template off which the body could read how to build proteins. But we now know that it's constantly. The strand breaks,
and it develops different little chemicals that get stuck to it, which are called adducts, and a number of other. There's 6 or 7 possible different things that happen to it. And the body has different ways of repairing this damage that's constantly happening. It has a series of enzymes, for example, that go along and read out the DNA strand and stitch it up if it needs a break, or removes the adduct if it's stuck to it.
So he's going to talk about the issues with the replication. And when I get into Maria Konovalenko, she explains that very well, being that her specialty is genetics, but I'm going to let this continue.
This repair rate is proportional to the maximum lifespan between species. That's a very important correlation found by some people at Ohio State University about 4 or 5 years ago. Man has the best DNA repair rate, and he's the longest-lived species. Mouse lives only 3 years, and he has a poor DNA repair rate. And other animals, if you study their DNA repair, fall kind of on a straight line. You can correlate the extent of DNA repair with maximum lifespan.
And yet, Doctor, some people live to be 100. Is that genetics? I mean, if my father is going to die when he's, 65, and your father lived till he's 90, don't you have a much greater chance of having a longer lifespan than I will?
There's a fairly heavy...
Well, what you have to understand, though, is like Jack LaLanne said, Jack LaLanne's father died in his 50s. Jack LaLanne didn't die in his 50s. Ray Kurzweil is another one whose father died early. Ray Kurzweil isn't dying early. So you have to understand lifestyle factors. We now know more about epigenetics, and we're starting to realize that, lifestyle choices play a role in how genes are expressed. But let's hear what Dr. Walford has to say. Remember, this is before epigenetics was really heavily known or really heavily looked into, but let's hear what he has to say.
Genetic component to it. But if you have maximum genetics, if you're the best genetically endowed person, then you might live to be 100 to 110. If your genetics is not so good, then you're apt to be destined to live only to be 70 or 80, assuming that an automobile doesn't get you first.
You've mentioned 110 as being the maximum, and yet I understand there are people in Russia, in a specific region called Georgia, that live to be 120, even 130. How do you account for that?
Well, it isn't true.
I was going to say, that's highly speculated. That's a lot of them got caught lying.
No, it's not true. There are 3 so-called long-lived population isolates in the world that have been a bit popularized. One of the Russians. And the problem with all of them is that there's no adequate documentation for how old they really are.
However, now there is in the blue zones. Everybody should understand the blue zones. But here, let's go on here.
Taking the one that you mentioned in Soviet Georgia, most of the people there have taken documents from their father or their brother or something. This was done by deserters from the Red Army or the White Army during the Revolution. It was done by people in that region in order to escape the Tsar's tax collectors and the Tsar's soldiers who would come down and try to impress them into the military.
So you're saying they're lying and using other people's birth certificates.
Yeah.
Why would they want to do that? I mean, to desert and all of those reasons, yes, but why would they need to say, well, I'm 120, I'm 130 years old, if it's not true?
Because it's an honor to be old in that society. If the tradition of being very old is built up, it's an honor to be, it's promoted, and they just promote it or drift into it. If you're 85, you're just an old codger, nobody's too interested in you. But if you're 110, everybody's very interested in you, so this gets promoted. Also, the Russian government tries to promote this because it proves communism works.
Oh, that's true. We have to take a commercial break. When we come back, I'd like to ask you about other factors.
Introducing Bragg Apple Cider Vinegar Supplements, made with our original ACV.
Immunologist and professor of pathology at UCLA, and we're talking about aging, and all of us don't want to get old and don't want to have all those wrinkles. They seem to appear anyway. But one of the factors we haven't discussed yet is diet. It seems that Americans are becoming more and more nutrition conscious, which I personally feel is important. But how big a factor is diet in the aging process?
I think diet is a very big factor, and as a matter of fact, the best way to prolong lifespan now, at least in animals, is by dietary manipulation. We've been studying that from the standpoint of immunology, but the classic gerontologic experiment which does this is if you take animals such as rats or mice and put them on a very low calorie diet so that it almost begins to interfere with growth rate if you begin at time of weaning, you can double the lifespan, or 25 to 100% increase in lifespan by restricting calories. You have to restrict calories so much that you have to supplement the diet with vitamins and minerals and so forth, so they don't become malnourished.
So fasting might be.
Again, what's important is you have to look into Dr. Bruce Ames's triage theory, because that shows why overly restricting calories may have a negative impact on some animals. The supplementation is extremely important, even if you're not ridiculously supplementing ridiculously restricting calories.
The key to longer life.
Well, one way that you can increase lifespan in animals is by intermittent fasting. That is, you feed them every other day. But as I say, you have to feed them a very selected.
Now, keep in mind, he's talking about intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is not a new thing, and neither is time-restricted feeding.
Diet. The idea then is like undernutrition without malnutrition, end quote.
And you think that that can be translated to human beings?
No question. It's worked in every kind of animal tested.
What about cholesterol? Everyone says one of the reasons that we have such a high rate of heart disease in this country is because we're all eating so much fat. True?
Well, I think that's probably true, yeah. There's good evidence that the high-fat diets are bad for arteriosclerosis and heart disease and so forth. How much they affect aging is another question, in the sense that perhaps the unsaturated fats, which are recommended to cure the arteriosclerosis, are not so good for some of the other things, such as aging, cancer, and so forth. So I don't necessarily recommend unsaturated fats to a high degree from the aging standpoint.
Let's say then that we eat terrifically well, we keep our diets low calorically, we also have low cholesterol and everything, but what about stress? Certainly in the business that I'm in, the profession I'm in, I have a great deal of stress, and probably everybody in the studio does. Pressure, under deadlines all the time. How much does that age us?
I don't think there's any evidence that ordinary stress, at least to the extent that you're talking about, increases the aging rate.
No?
No.
What about the environment then? We live here in Los Angeles. I have to drive in on the freeway every morning and inhale all those fumes and traffic. We have smog, all kinds of other pollution coming at us. Is that a factor?
Well, it certainly decreases average lifespan. Its effect on aging probably decreases that to some extent, because there are free radicals and other chemicals in the environment which do accelerate the aging.
And this has to do with the importance when I talk about Dr. Kenneth Cooper. He talks greatly about antioxidants, and I'm going to get into that with him, but antioxidants are very necessary to help you deal with pollution, ultraviolet radiation, etc.
Process.
Where could you go then to get away from here? No, but I mean, I've heard of people that live in the Himalayas that supposedly live a longer life, and other people who are breatharians.
Yeah.
Is that a possibility that you could really live just on air?
Well, the old Taoist teachings, as a matter of fact, gerontology and science itself began with the Taoists, and the goal of the original Taoists 6,000 years ago in China was to achieve physical immortality. And they had a system of mental gymnastics along with meditation to do this. And they also began pharmacology. Science began with pharmacology in the Taoists, which was gerontology in those days. They believed that by constant study and meditation and so forth, you could get down till your breath was meat and your saliva was drink. And then you achieved the diamond crystal body of what was called a CN, HSI.
And how long did they live?
Well, supposedly indefinitely. In Chinese legend, the CN, the immortals, lived forever.
But you don't believe that?
No, I don't believe that.
There is a gentleman supposedly living in India today named Babaji, and I would love to go visit him because I understand that he is quite old too, and he claims that he may be an immortalist. Do you rule that out as a possibility? Totally?
Yes, I do rule it out. For example, suppose we stop the aging process now on everybody, and everybody stayed exactly their present age. How long would you live? Well, if the accident rate remained the same as it is now, then maximum lifespan would be about 600 years. Even if you stop aging, you don't achieve physical immortality unless you also stop all kinds of accidents. Accident rate the same now, no aging, 600 years. You change the accident rate,
And that's why, like Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw in their book, Life Extension, A Practical Scientific Approach, they talk about not letting accidents and stupidity kill you.
prolong it, but nobody will ever be immortal immortal because you can't get the accident rate to zero.
However, your discovery apparently will double our lifespan. Could you tell us briefly what that is and when we can expect it to occur?
Well, you can probably double lifespan by dietary restriction if it's undertaken at a time of weaning. I don't think you can do it as early as that. Is not feasible in humans. You can undertake dietary restriction probably at age 20 or 30 and expect to extend lifespan 20, 30, or 40%.
And this was what you talked about, the eating every other day?
That would be eating every other day if you eat the right things, which I'm not exactly prepared to formulate at the moment, but that's coming. To really double the lifespan by other ways, we have to learn how to either control the flux of free radicals, which are activated oxygen atoms, which damage the body and are one of the main theories of aging, or increase the level of DNA repair rate, which we don't know how to do yet, but are working on. So I hope that I or others will make that discovery in the next few years. I think that's imminent.
What about your other studies on the immunological side? Will there be maybe a shot or a vaccine that someone can one day take and then live twice as long?
I think probably that one will be able to extend lifespan by manipulating the immune system. There are already chemicals and ways of doing that at the moment. For example, the diet will rejuvenate the immune system. There are different drugs that will to some extent do that. There's some so-called active lipids that have been discovered by Dr. Heron at the Weizmann Institute in Israel that seems to rejuvenate the immune system and also the central nervous system to a considerable extent. This is just now being experimented with, and how it will affect lifespan, I don't know, but it certainly rejuvenates many of the things that we can test. There are other drugs that are used in the treatment of different immunological diseases like systemic lupus erythematosus, one with a long name, that rejuvenates the immune system.
One should keep in mind the importance of the immune system and immunosenescence in aging, and this is why looking into things like Dr. Terry Walls's diet, the Walls protocol, and other things like Dr. Joel Fuhrman's concepts are so important, because keeping the immune system healthy is important to keeping the whole body healthy. This is going to be a multi-part series of videos, but this will be part 1, and I'm going to continue tomorrow with part 2 and probably part 3 and 4. There might be more than 4 parts to this.